So hello and welcome to Tolkien with Friends. Today we're excited to have Iris join us as we venture into Lothlorien. Now Iris I originally met as Hobbit Hot Takes on TikTok, and we've had a lot of back and forth on that platform, but I'm excited to finally dive headfirst into the books with you and, really talk it out.
Yeah, likewise.
I know, because there's only like so much conversation you can really have in the comment section,
Of
you know?
Twitter.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
how many characters?
Yeah, and it's like, oh, and then I have to edit it so that I can like keep
Yeah,
it to one comment. But then lately, I'm just like, you're just gonna have to keep reading this comment because
yeah,
I'm gonna keep adding replies.
yeah.
So now, I don't think I've ever gotten the chance to ask you this before, but so what is your Tolkien origin story? Like, how were you introduced to Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, and what keeps you coming back to these stories?
Uh, I think I've done a video on it on TikTok. Actually, it might have been your prompt,
It
but
might have been.
Ooh.
I don't. But now we can like go beyond the 3 minutes.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. So I was 11, around 11 when the movies came out, and
mm,
um, I was a big reader. That was my personality, and
relatable.
I had read The Hobbit before, and I had tried to read The Lord of the Rings, but I got a bit lost with the plot. But when
Sure.
I heard that the movies were coming out, I wanted to read the books before the movies, and I thought, well, I can do it. I'll read each part of the trilogy in the year coming up to the movie, and then I started reading, and I didn't put the book down for the whole weekend, and I finished it at school on Monday. I think I read for the whole time I was awake for 3 days, and
Wow.
That's amazing.
that's how my plan went.
Yeah. So you were
And
like,
then
yeah, I'll just read one book a year, and then
yeah,
ends up reading all of them in one weekend.
yeah, I was really taken with it. I was already into fantasy, but I think reading that, I was like, yes, this is what I wanted. And I've just kept reading it and rereading it. And when the pandemic started, I started listening to an audiobook version. And then I listened to that about 3 times in 1 year. It was like my
Yeah.
comfort audiobook. And then I started making TikTok videos about it. And it's, even though I had been rereading it through the years, I think that really the interest in everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's relatable because I feel like I have probably read these books once ish a year. I can't commit to what if I did it in college or not, but
Mm.
ever since then, like I have reread them once a year ish since I was like 10 or 11. But then, with the pandemic, I feel like I don't know if this is true for you all, but I felt like I was really leaning heavily on media and content that I found comforting and that I knew was really familiar with. Like it wasn't
Oh
something that I
yeah.
necessarily had to, recommit to. Like I could just let it kind of wash over me because I already know everything. Like we ended up watching like the first three Pirates of the Caribbean movies again. Like I watched Downton Abbey a bunch of times, and obviously like Lord of the Rings. Like I watched the movies a billion times during the pandemic,
Mm.
and then started rereading them. And even now, like I reread them last year, and that was when I kind of started making my TikToks, and then I'm rereading them now for the podcast, and I feel like every time I read them, there's something else there that I didn't really notice before or think about, and
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you keep doing this to me? It's been 20 years. How are you doing this? Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
that's the
when
magic
you've
of Lord of the
reread them
Rings.
so many times, when you're reading again, you will remember, this reminds me of the other bit, and you start making these connections
Yeah.
um between little details in different parts of the books, and you can't really do that on a first read or a second read. So it
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
keeps giving.
Yeah. Anna, do you feel like Game of Thrones keeps giving to you?
I definitely feel like Game of Thrones is always giving to me. Um, I have recently finished reading like all of the books, like the five that are out. But I do rewatch the whole series once-ish, a year. I'm just like constantly watching
Ish.
Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always like, ooh, that's foreshadowing this, or like that's a fun detail that I've never missed, never catch before. So yeah, it's when you like something that much, I think you're always just appreciating new things about it.
Definitely. And Anna, how is your reading of what is the Game of Thrones book
Fire
you're
and
reading?
Blood.
Fire and Blood. Okay. How is that going?
Since the move, it has been quite slow.
Oh, sure.
Quite honestly, I have been behind on my reading, but it's so much backstory
Mm.
that it's just a different feeling since I went into reading the Game of Thrones books, like knowing all the characters, knowing what's going to happen, and now I'm just like, wow, I don't know who any of these people are, and I don't know what's important, and it's a little intimidating, but
Literally me reading Silmarillion for the first time.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like I was like, who are all these people with F names? Like,
yeah,
why does every
Yeah.
single person need to be named with an F? Like in Lord of the Rings, there are a good chunk of names, but like they sound different enough. Even though like Galadriel and Gimli have G names, they're totally different like syllables. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah. And they don't
everybody
come at you
in
all at once.
Yes, they're like slowly introduced over time, and then instead in the Silmarillion, it's like, and so was born such and such, and they had such and such. And it's just like I'm like,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, in Game of Thrones, like everyone's name is Aegon, everyone's name is Viserys, and I'm just like, okay, this is the first one, and this is the 15th one. I don't even know.
I know.
But
I definitely need to if I do try to reread the Silmarillion before, maybe that's the book I'll bring on our vacation. But maybe I'll just like because I my version of it is a paperback and I have already like crushed it underneath my bed once, so
oh
like I
no.
could totally like annotate that one and not feel bad about it. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Because there's
Yeah.
always like my one copy of the book that I like try to keep pretty, and then there's the ones that I like open constantly and are like using all the time. So, but that's neither here nor there.
You destroy books, got it.
Yeah, I try not to, but yeah. Sorry, Silmarillion. You, but it was a used book. It's fine. It's fine. It's seen some things. Um,
I like that in
so
a book.
you like being able to like really get into it.
Yeah, and even if I buy used books, I like to see that somebody has read them.
I know,
Yeah,
seeing someone else's notes in it.
those are fun.
Those are fun. I had a textbook like that once, and I was like, score! I don't have to do my homework all the way.
Oh my gosh, me too. But I had somebody that had just highlighted like everything, and I'm like,
Oh,
That's not
like,
helpful.
I don't know who you are, but like, you don't need to highlight everything because that kind of defeats the purpose of the
of
highlight.
highlighting.
Wherever you are, tech person, I don't even remember what textbook it was. I want to say an anthropology textbook, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I was like, are they just confused or did they think everything was important? I don't know. So we'll get back to why we're actually here, which is to talk about our friends in the Fellowship and where they are now. So last time we saw Frodo and the gang, Gandalf had just fallen into Moria and been taken out by the Balrog, and the Fellowship has like just barely escaped. And if you're following along in the books, we're picking up at the very beginning of Lothlorien and going all the way through Farewell to Lorien. And in the extended edition of Fellowship, this is about 2 hours and 28 minutes in until 2 hours and 53 minutes into the movie. So that's like, what, 20 something minutes? 25 minutes of movie? If the math is wrong, nobody cares. So now I really did have a hard time narrowing down what I wanted to talk about for this one, since there are like a bunch of little tiny changes that happen. But I think to start, we will explore Gimli's character over these 3 chapters and his kind of evolution about like his relationship with the elves and also his relationship with Legolas. So Anna, before we dive into that, based on what you know from the movie, from Fellowship so far, like within the movies, like how do you perceive Gimli and his relationship with elves and specifically Legolas? Like, how does that come across in the films?
So only in relation to like the first movie, not
Yeah, like at this
their journey.
point,
So
how do
yeah,
you feel like they are? How are they doing?
um, there's definitely some tension, which is long, like generations of hostility between those two. And it at this point where they meet Galadriel, I still feel like there is still some tension. They're not really giving into their friendship much. It's just like circumstantial that they're together, they're working together. In the movie, Legolas does help save Gimli when they like almost fall off the thing.
Like
When
in Casa Do when he grabs his beard.
yeah,
Yeah, not the beard.
but yeah, it's still just like it's more of a teamwork effort because they're on a mission, not as much of the friendship that you see in like Two Towers starting to form.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair based on what we're given in the movie. So now, like in the books, obviously, it's going to be slightly different as far as how their relationship evolves. So, as Sarah was kind of pointing out to us last week, Gimli and Legolas are, they're still kind of bickering at this point, like when we meet them at the beginning of Lothlorien. But they're also, we're starting to see them kind of paired off. I love that Sarah pointed that out last time about, when they were in the chamber with Balin's tomb and they were afraid, and they were both like, they repeat the lines from um the book about like, we cannot get out, they're coming, we cannot get out, and they like echo what's in the book together, and they start and even when we get to in when they finally meet Galadriel and Celeborn, they give like Legolas responds about the Balrog, and then Gimli immediately responds afterwards. So they're like kind of constantly like next to each other. Their dialogue a lot of the time. So and so as they enter Lothlorien, we see more of this tension. Not only between Legolas and Gimli, but between just Gimli and his reaction with other elves. We saw like a little bit of it in Rivendell, but I think that Gimli and his family have such a better relationship with Elrond and his people that it doesn't come up too much. And then we kind of see like a full 180 by the end of these chapters. So in the movies, Fellowship enters the woods of Lothlorien, and it kind of seems like, and I don't even remember if this is not in the, if this is in the theatrical version or not, like, but Aragorn seems to kind of negotiate their entrance into the city. But in the books, the elves that kind of are keeping guard on the edges of Lothlorien more or less know the Fellowship will be coming at some point, and they are very surprised that they have a dwarf with them. And they're only willing to let him pass through the forest if he's blindfolded, because there's a law that dwarves are not permitted in this land. And Gimli throws a whole fit, right? He's like, I'm not any more likely than Legolas to betray you or whatever. And
Well, to be fair,
Haldir,
they didn't negotiate it with Gimli. They're just like, okay, time to blindfold the dwarf, and Gimli is
yes.
like, what?
Excuse you.
Yeah, it's like they're like, oh yeah, we'll blindfold him tomorrow, and then I don't know what Aragorn was thinking, just like, we'll deal with that, and that's a tomorrow problem, I guess. And so then when he just like brings it up, and Gimli is just like, absolutely not. No, you will not put a blindfold over me. Um, and he's very much not happy and refuses to go forward blindfolded. Like, he even threatens to leave, but they're like, you can't go back, and he literally can't go back. Like, they have this whole scene where they have this weird rope bridge that they have to kind of like barely hang on to and like walk across. But you don't really need to know that. So he refuses to go forward blindfolded. So Aragorn steps in and says, they're all gonna be blindfolded. It's not fair for him to be singled out. We're all gonna be blindfolded together. And then Gimli basically says that they're all gonna look stupid if they're all blindfolded and walking in the forest like that. So he's like, you know what? I'll compromise. I'll go blindfolded if Legolas is blindfolded with me. So then it's time for Legolas to get mad. And when Gimli had originally refused, he was like, a curse on the stiff necks of dwarves. And so then Aragorn, it's like, okay, well now, cursing the stiff necks of elves. And he's like, no, seriously, guys, we're all gonna be blindfolded. It's the only way that we're gonna get through this. So it's kind of like the first moment where it's like, these freaking elves, from Gimli's point of view. And it's interesting that they make a point of saying that there's a law that he does say the line that from the movies that they haven't had dealings with the dwarves since the dark days, but he makes a point of saying that there is literally a law that dwarves aren't allowed to come into Lothlorien. So I don't totally know like the genesis of that, like what caused that per se, but I think it's important to note for in a second. So, there's some really cute stuff that happens here, which we can get to in a little bit if we have time. But eventually, they finally make it to Galadriel and her husband Celeborn, and Gimli is kind of met with some more rudeness. So, Celeborn, when he finds out, like he's like, where the heck is Gandalf? And they explain that a Balrog took him. Yeah, he blames the dwarves for waking up the Balrog and blames Gimli for Gandalf's death and says that he wouldn't have let Gimli or any of his friends inside the border if he had known that that's what had happened. And Galadriel's response, I think, is probably the first big turning point here for Gimli. So, similar to in the movie, she says that needless were none of the deeds of Gandalf in life, and do not let the great emptiness of Khazad-dûm fill your heart, Gimli, son of Gloin. And but in the book, I think it's not that much longer of a phrase, but I think it's a little more powerful. So she says, dark is the water of Keled Zaram, and cold are the springs of Kibble Nala, and fair were the many-pillared halls of Khazad-dûm in elder days before the mighty kings beneath the stone. And Gimli, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes, and it seemed to him he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy and saw there love and understanding. So that is, in the movies they have this thing where she's like kind of like reading everybody's mind a little bit, which isn't wrong. But I think that you don't really get to see.
Book.
Yeah, it is there, but it's like you don't get to see the real moment between Galadriel and Gimli.
Yeah.
Because he then responds that she is more fair than all the jewels beneath the earth at that point. So you start to see, like, I mean, obviously Galadriel's a stunner, and it was probably easy to be like, well, this pretty lady's saying nice things to me, but it is interesting that at the same time that Celeborn is being rude, he does apologize. But, Galadriel makes a point of saying, like, maybe I don't know you specifically, but I do showing this kind of understanding between cultures and across, barriers. And I think that's something that we've seen multiple times in Fellowship at this point, usually through Frodo, of crossing these kind of cultural divides of being friendly with elves. And so now it's kind of like Gimli's turn a little bit. And he's a little more resistant than, because Frodo is kind of grown up with this kind of reverence for elves, whereas I don't think that would be true of Gimli. So I just think that's really interesting. A little slight nuance there. And so, now we have the Fellowship. Now, this is definitely not very clear. Like, the timeline is wild, and I don't know. How long do you feel like they stay in Lothlorien based on the movies?
I don't know, like a week, maybe?
They stay there for a month.
Oh.
So, It's fair. They've been through a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they need some time to chill. A
Yeah.
lot of adventuring.
A lot of some grieving needs to happen, some resting in general. Like that is one other thing is that Frodo and Sam are a little bit wounded after their encounter with the orcs in Moria. Like in the movies, they very much brush it. Like he's not dead, because of the mithril coat that he's wearing,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but he is like fairly bruised up and like
One would
some
think
of
so.
yeah. So they all get a nice long break. Um, and so they're there for a month, and during that time, Legolas goes off to hang out with the elves a lot, but often he took Gimli with him when he went abroad in the land, and the others wondered at this change. So so we see Galadriel being like, "No, no, we're gonna be cool," and then immediately we see like I think that there's been probably hints about them starting to become friends. But then now is the time where they're really getting to hang out together and really understand each other. And I just love that he makes a point of, he is hanging out with the elves because I'm sure that that's something that he has missed. But then he is making a point of bringing Gimli along for the ride.
Hmm.
What are your feelings about that?
I love it. And I definitely think like Lothlorien is the like turning point in Legolas and Gimli's relationship. And isn't only tension before this. There are also moments where they are on each other's side. But
Mm-hmm.
like I think their time in Lothlorien really starts their friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they like, it's almost like a married couple bickering in a way because it's never very serious when they're mad at each other. You know what I mean? Um, but it is like, and now they're actually having time to get to know each other. They're not like fleeing from danger into danger. It's kind of a break for everybody.
Yeah, and I think some of the tension before that is that 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 they're not sure what preconceptions or prejudices the other one has about them. So they're a bit like got their guard up a bit. Like there's a moment
Mm-hmm.
I think like in the very beginning of the chapter Lothlorien before they reach Lothlorien where Legolas says something like in passing something like when the dwarves woke the evil in Moria, and
Mm-hmm.
Gimli immediately replies, "Well, dwarves didn't create that evil." And Legolas is like, "That's
Exactly.
not what I said." But you can see that there's this tension that comes from like, I don't know what you think about me.
Does seem to be clear misconceptions about each culture. Like the way that they probably talk to each other about each other, if that makes sense. Like within,
Sure.
dwarves talking to dwarves about elves, elves talking to elves
Mm.
about dwarves. So I think that Gimli and Legolas's relationship is starting to be this first time that we see them getting to not only know each other but getting to understand each other more, and from that it kind of trickles into a lot of other situations.
Yeah, it's like a one-on-one relationship between those two people. Um, rather than just I'm an elf and you're a dwarf.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And the way that they're able to take what they learn from each other later and kind of make the world better, which is cool. And what do you guys think? Do you think that it was mainly just the timing of their stay in Lothlorien and like the way that they're able to take time together, or do you think that what Galadriel said had any impact on Legolas as well about how he started to include Gimli more in
Oh, I'm
his
sure it
life?
did. Like I think like having that time I feel like having that time plays a big part in it. Also
Mm.
because like in the whole book, these moments of rest are so important overall. But I think like the way that uh, Galadriel treats Gimli, and also the way that Gimli treats Galadriel, probably has a big impact as well. And that like even though Gimli was grumbling about elves the day before, he's able to receive this uh, courtesy and love and understanding from Galadriel and move that relationship forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense
Mhm.
because she's such a big deal, right? So I feel like,
Is the
and
deal.
yeah,
Mm.
so it's like if you aren't listening to Galadriel, then what are you doing?
What are you even doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like there's a point where Boromir tries to say something like um, I can't remember the exact line, but eventually implying that she's not exactly 100% a good guy,
Yeah.
and Aragorn is like, shut your mouth. You don't even know what you're talking about, you know?
I was just thinking about that today. I was reading. I didn't get through the whole three chapters, but I was reading some parts, and I was thinking about the difference between Gimli and Boromir, because Boromir is
Mm-hmm.
so suspicious of Lothlorien and of Galadriel, and he just holds his ground on that. And
Yeah.
I don't know what he's doing for the month. If is he just brooding in a corner?
It kind
But yeah,
of feels
but he's
like
like
that.
when Galadriel you know uh talks to each of them telepathically or whatever. Um,
Yeah, where she's like
e- e-
testing their hearts.
yeah, and uh, like kind of asking them like, if you had the chance to go home and have everything you wanted right now, would you leave this quest? And I think like everyone else that's in the scene where they talk about it is quite humble about it, but Boromir is like, well, I think she was tempting me and offering me something she doesn't have, and he's like seeing this as a very negative thing. And I think
Mm.
that's that also seems like a parallel to the ring that's tempting you
Mm.
with the things that you want. But Boromir has a very negative reaction, and I don't think that we see him really move on from that in the book. Maybe
Yeah.
I think it's different. I think his whole character is a bit different uh, in these scenes, specifically in the movie.
Yeah, so it's so funny because he does not say what it is that she offered him. Most people don't. I think it's only Sam that admits to what she
Yeah,
asked.
yeah,
So this is in a book. So like in the movies, you only really see her say something to Frodo telepathically, but then Boromir definitely in the extended. I don't think this is in the theatrical, but he says that she what was it that she I wrote it down. I wrote it down, you guys. I'm prepared. I swear. But he says that she talked about his father and the fall of Gondor, and that even now there is hope, but he cannot see it. And I'm like, I don't think that's what she said, though.
yeah.
Because that's not really
Not in the book,
offering.
definitely.
Yeah. So I think it fits within like in the movies with Boromir, they're trying to um I think they're using him for Aragorn's story mainly to me, as far as trying to show Aragorn slowly making his way to accepting his role as king of Gondor, and that is a point where Boromir is like, he's speaking about how much he loves Minas Tirith and the White City, and that when they return, like people will be so happy to see the Lords of Gondor returning, and Aragorn's just like, maybe. Like he doesn't say anything. He's just like, okay. um. So yeah, but it's in the book Boromir. I don't know if he's ever really comfortable in Lothlorien.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Another thing that I noticed they changed about Boromir in Lothlorien is that in the book there are, I think, two times that Aragorn, or I'm not sure if it's by someone else the second time, but at least once it's Aragorn that says like something like "There's no evil in Lothlorien except the evil that you bring," to
Yes.
Boromir specifically, which uh, in the movie it's like they kind of say something like that, but it's changed
That they
to
may.
this like to say. Um, I think Galadriel telepathically saying to Frodo before they arrive that you bring an evil into this place, and I don't think that's
Yes.
what was meant in the books.
No. Yeah,
Mhm.
so the I don't think there's any question for Galadriel about Frodo. You know what I mean? Like the fact that he has the ring isn't necessarily the evil. I mean, it's not evil,
Yeah,
right? But if you're not using it, um, then you're pretty okay. Uh, so I do think that it is that's quite a significant change if you ask me about as far as the implications about Boromir
yeah.
versus Frodo.
Mhm.
Anna, what are your feelings about Boromir?
Um, I think the movie definitely makes him seem to be a bad guy, that he's shady, that he's
Yeah,
never really truthful with the rest of the fellowship. Um, and that's how I think that most audiences perceive him, because straight out the gate at when he's with Elrond, he's like, why don't we just like take it? Like, why don't we just like use the ring? And then he somehow still gets to go on this quest with them, and he keeps having these moments of weakness um,
Hmm.
throughout the entire movie. And then when he's with Galadriel, I think he's like, oh no, they know I'm a rat. They know, like, that I am not a cool dude. And, they're going to tell all my buddies that I'm on this adventure with. And that's what the movie gives off.
that's
That's so
interesting because
interesting.
I feel like in the movies they maybe like gave him more of these like nice moments with the hobbits and like maybe made him a bit more sympathetic also with his talk with Aragorn in Lothlorien.
Hmm.
But maybe it's
And when Boromir says to Frodo, like, "Don't carry the weight of the dead,"
yeah,
like he's trying to reach out to Frodo. Um, but I do think that I mean, he is sus a little
yeah,
bit, but I don't think that it is until, to me, that um the point in Amon Hen when the before the breaking of the Fellowship where that's his big moment of really revealing like what's going on in his brain. But
yeah. And
in
I
the
think yeah.
oh, what were you saying?
No, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say that there's a point right before they're about to leave where again Boromir tries to be like, "Hey, like we could take the ring to Minas Tirith and you know, what does he say? Then there's a little use of more weapons. Obviously, if we're seeking to destroy it, but he's essentially implying that like they could try to use it,
Mm,
but he says, folly to throw away. He paused suddenly as if he had become aware that he was speaking his thoughts aloud. It would be folly to throw lives away, I mean. He ended. It is a choice between defending a strong place and walking openly into the arms of death. At least that is how I see it. Frodo caught something new and strange in Boromir's glance, and he looked hard at him. Plainly, Boromir's thought was different from his final words. It would be folly to throw away what? The Ring of Power? He had said something like this at the council, but then he had accepted the correction of Elrond. But had he accepted the correction of Elrond? Kind of sounds like
yeah.
he didn't. Kind of sounds like he's been thinking some thoughts this whole
Yeah,
time.
and he's been thinking on his own.
Hmm.
Just you know what I think about Boromir. I think he's the problematic guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it makes me wonder, like, even if he was having these thoughts. But it's like, I get it. Like, the ring is a powerful thing, right? And he is desperate to save his city, right? And make his daddy proud, sure.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder, like, what if Boromir, without really hope or agenda maybe, but just spoke his thoughts to Aragorn? Could Aragorn have said something to help him in his dilemma?
Yeah, I don't think Boromir really understands the ring, even though it's explained to him. And maybe someone
Yeah.
should just go over and over it with him.
Yeah.
Someone like Aragorn, maybe, unless there's too much tension with the whole "I'm the king of your country."
Maybe. But I don't know if he would really listen to anybody else
Yeah, fair.
at that point.
Yeah, he definitely trusts another man of Gondor
Yeah.
more than these tricksy elves or wizards, probably. Because
Yeah.
we know
That's a,
Denethor is not that into wizards.
no, that's true. He so at later we'll definitely see this, but Gandalf and Saruman have visited Minas Tirith many times to learn, because there's a lot of documents and stuff there to learn from, and they've visited many times, but Denethor's not really a fan
Yeah,
of that. So, and I think that Boromir probably has inherited more of Denethor's prejudices than Faramir did.
yeah. Wizard
Um,
pupil.
yeah, Faramir was into it.
Yeah.
So, but Boromir definitely listens to his dad, which to. So, I mean, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, right? So,
Yeah. That about sums it
um,
up.
what?
That about
Sorry, I
sums it
missed it.
up.
Yeah, yeah. So, the next thing. Oh, I do want to say something about Gimli. It's kind of like probably the cherry on top of his interactions with Galadriel when he asks for one hair from her golden
Mm.
head. And the significance of this isn't really mentioned in Lord of the Rings, and I feel like it's one of those things with like Glorfindel. Like, he had, like, at this point Tolkien had no hope that the Silmarillion was going to be published. He'd already been told no. So it's almost just like these little Easter eggs for himself, I feel like. Because he's building on top of the stuff that he's already imagined. So in when he asks for the hair and Galadriel gives him 3, the significance of this, I think, is he's contrasting Gimli with Feanor, who is one of the main elves of the Silmarillion and probably one of the, like, the biggest elves of all time, you know. So Feanor is one of the OG elves, essentially, and he is basically good at everything, but he's kind of a jerk. And he makes the Silmarils, which get stolen by Morgoth, Melkor, one of the bad god, essentially, Sauron's boss, and then he swears an oath that he will get them back, and a lot of bad things happen because of that oath. But before he makes Silmarils, he asks Galadriel for a strand of her hair. Essentially, I think his idea was to use her hair to make this jewelry, but then he settles for the light of the 2 trees, which I think is funny.
Isn't
But
that his wife?
hmm?
Isn't that his wife?
Galadriel?
Yeah.
No, she's married to Celeborn.
And who are we talking about?
Feanor.
Feanor. Okay.
So Feanor is very dead by this point in the story.
Okay.
So he's just like one of the OG elves from Silmarillion that a lot of stuff centers around.
Okay.
But Galadriel's a very good judge of character, and she says, "No, you cannot have my hair. Sorry." And so he goes on to make the Silmarils, blah blah blah. But then Gimli asks for hair from her, and she gives him 3. and which he goes on, he wants to make them into heirlooms of his house, you know.
Yeah.
It's and he asks it super courteously, like he says it so nice, and she says that like no one has ever asked her something, and used never asked her something so nicely. And I'm like, dang, how did Feanor ask you? Was he like, hey girl, can I just grab a little piece of hair? She was like, excuse me?
Don't touch me.
Yeah, that's what I imagine. Feanor is just
Yeah.
kind of like rude and entitled.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Gimli
I
just
just
wants them to have that heirloom, that memory of the prettiest thing he ever saw.
mm-hmm.
I think that's
Mm-hmm.
so innocent.
Yeah, it's so sweet, and he didn't even want to ask for it, but she presses him
Mm,
because she was like, "You're not going to be the only." She's like, "I don't know what to get you, and you're not going to be the only one walking away without a gift. So
yeah.
what do you want? Come on." And he's like, "Well, since you
Aww.
asked, And it's so sweet, and I feel like his interactions with Galadriel, like you can see like Gimli's interactions with um what's his name, Haldir, at the beginning of the chapters, where it's very
Mm.
like, bruh, like no, and then with Galadriel, he's like, hey, he's like softens up so much for her. And obviously Legolas understands the significance of the hairs, so I'm sure that he was
Mm.
like,
Dang, boy,
yeah,
what you asking for?
yeah. Basically, I think I was a little bit shocked, and then probably even more shocked that she said yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of Gimli's journey in Lothlorien. He kind of makes a really big transformation as far as his relationship with Legolas is, that I think that this is the point where it's like, yeah, we're buddies now on this quest. And I think we also start to see um because obviously, Haldir, he says that he can't change the laws of Lothlorien, as far as like about blindfolding Gimli because they're not allowed. But it's like, okay, well, we know that Celeborn and Galadriel are the rulers of Lothlorien, so who made the law? You know what I'm saying? And then to have them who probably made this law, show such kindness and friendship to Gimli by the end of it. I think it's
Yeah.
everybody's walking away changed.
Yeah.
So now we can get to some Sam and Frodo stuff
Mm.
about the Mirror of Galadriel. So I think that that's probably like the most iconic moment in the movies from this section. There's a lot of iconic moments in these movies, but when Galadriel shows in the movies, it's just Frodo shows him her mirror, and then Frodo is feeling kind of overwhelmed, and he's like, "You can have it, you can have the ring," and then Galadriel, has her whole like freak out thing.
Mm.
But in the books, it's Frodo and Sam who get to look into the mirror of Galadriel, and I was just reading this the other day, and it kind of surprised me what they saw. I'm like, how did I forget this? But pretty sure they both see into the future a little bit. And Sam, he definitely sees the scouring of the Shire, which in the movies they kind of give to Frodo to see, the things happening in the Shire. But in the movies they have it as Sam being shackled and in chains and being a part of it, so that was interesting. But I think that they more or less see the future. Sam sees the scouring of the Shire, but he thinks it's happening now, and
Mm.
he considers going back, and then Galadriel's like, no, don't use this for advice. Like, this may not have even happened yet. Don't worry about it. But Sam also sees Frodo with a pale face lying fast asleep under a great dark cliff, and himself going along a dim passage and climbing an endless winding stair. Kind of sounds like some Mordor stuff to me.
I think
Like,
it's I think it's even when for the I think when they're in Kirithungol, I think when he thinks Frodo is dead, I think he even thinks, "Oh, this is what I saw in the mirror."
mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Like he recognizes that image of Frodo's pale face.
Yeah, it's like, uh, I feel bad for forgetting that Sam saw that. You know, I remembered him seeing the scouring stuff, but I
Yeah.
forgot that he saw like far ahead. Um, and similar to Frodo, he also I think Frodo sees a little bit of the present and the future. I think he sees Gandalf returning as Gandalf the White. It's like described as like a figure that reminds him of Gandalf, but then he's like, "Oh, but he's robed in white." So
Mm.
that it's probably not Gandalf, but it
Hmm.
feels like Gandalf. Um and then he also sees a part of, I think, the end of the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Like he sees the White City. You know, it's just like flashes of things, like the White Tower and the ships with dark sails and Aragorn's. He doesn't know it's Aragorn's, but like the tree with the 7 stars,
Mm.
flag unfurling. And obviously, they don't do it exactly like that in the movies. So, but I think that could have been cool to have that like quick flashes of what they were already going to show later. But they don't
Yeah.
do that.
Mm-mm.
But they don't
I
do
think it
that.
also would have been nice to have Sam there with Frodo, because I
Yeah,
think
I
he's
agree.
I think he's there for most things with Frodo, and I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
That
And
he's
I
not
really
just a
love.
sidekick.
Yeah, exactly. Like they are really there for each other in so many ways. And I also love that um, Sam Frodo realizes that he can't give the ring to Galadriel, right? But then Sam is like, I think you're right. I think she should take it. Um, and says that um you'd put things to rights. You'd stop them digging up the gaffer and turning him adrift. You'd make some folk pay for their dirty work. Because he's still very concerned about what he just saw in the mirror that
Yeah.
looked like the scouring of the Shire. And Galadriel responds, I would. That is how it would begin. But it would not stop with that, alas. And I'm like, oh! I'm like, it reminds me of, like, in the movies at least, when Gandalf says, like, I would use this thing from a desire to do good, when he's explaining,
Yeah.
like, Frodo, I can't
Yeah.
take it either. Um, so it just, I think it calls into question, like, how the power of the ring works, because I don't know if it's ever, like, fully explored, because for someone like Galadriel or Gandalf, who are really powerful beings on this Middle Earth, that they could potentially use this ring for good things, but that it's I guess because the ring is so, and I mean it is literally Sauron's spirit like poured into it, right? So it can't really make good things. So that makes me wonder, like, okay, so Galadriel saves the Shire and punishes those who are responsible for it. Like, say if she had the chance to do so. But then what? Then is it like just like a lust for power at that point, and you
I think
just
for
escalate?
Gandalf, yeah, I think that for both Gandalf and Galadriel, it would just escalate into um, this "I know what's best for everybody," and
Mm-hmm.
then trying to make everything, be in control of everything, and then succumb to the evil of the
Yeah.
ring.
Yeah. I think so. Anna, do you have any thoughts on about how the ring works? I see.
Sorry, I need
Okay.
a charger. My God, don't break anything. Sorry.
That's honest, Josh. So me and Anna both have Joshes. Both
Yeah,
ended
I
up
remember
marrying
from
Josh.
one of your
Oh
episodes.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a little sneak peek of one.
Did you see him?
A little bit.
Okay.
Barely.
His computer charger was in here.
Hmm.
What was your question?
Oh, I was just gonna ask you about how you think, about what your thoughts are about the power of the ring, and if a good guy tried to use it.
I think it would just, well, because you kind of mentioned it with the difference between Gollum and Frodo, how Gollum was not super good. He still had those black parts of his soul, so it deteriorated him in a different way. Whereas Frodo had it, for extended period of time and could resist those urges. I think that if you are a good person, you have a good soul, it'll still affect you, but just not in the same way as if you have evil intents. And Galadriel is powerful and good, but it would still probably end up corrupting her in one way. It might not be a straightforward evil fire brimstone type of way, that we've seen it affect other people, but she probably couldn't resist fully.
Yeah, and I think that with the power, like whoever has it, if you're a powerful person, it kind of like amplifies it significantly,
Yeah.
probably by a certain amount of times, because Frodo is literally like not just that he's tiny, but that he is just like a different kind of guy. Like he's your regular dude, and he hasn't been really involved in like the ways of the world. And elves have like their own kind of magic to them and all that, but with Galadriel and Gandalf, who have been so entrenched in kind of like saving the world for a long time, I think that and they have such big vision and plans. But I feel like whereas Frodo is like trying to just get to the next day in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think the
think,
thing about having a hobbit as a ring bearer is that they're not very powerful or power hungry, but also just
mm-hmm,
that th- they don't have huge amounts of power that could be abused.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, it would be interesting. It would like a very wild alternate universe, I think, if like Galadriel had taken the ring, because she says that she has thought about it for many years what she would do if she
Mm.
her had the chance to take it. Um, so it makes me wonder about like the Rings of Power show. Because they are going to be shown. I think they are going to be focusing on Galadriel a lot, and it makes me wonder like, what if they take that line and make it like I feel like the vibe so far from like interviews I've read and things are her hunting down the servants of Morgoth in the beginning. But I almost wonder if later, after the rings are made, what if she has a moment where she tries to look for it?
Mm.
I don't know. Well, maybe not, because it wouldn't have been lost until the very end. We're gonna need a. I feel like we're gonna need a season about the beginning of the Third Age, if you ask me. But because there's so much overlapping things happening. But I don't know. It makes me wonder, like, what were Galadriel's ambitions when she was younger?
Mm.
Hopefully we find out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be interesting to explore for sure.
Yeah.
So now, just because I'm petty, I really want to talk about how dumb Sam's gift was in the movies.
Oh.
I so Anna, as you know, in the movies they give him rope, and he
Yes.
asks, "Are you out of all those nice shiny daggers?" And then Galadriel just kind of like goes, and then like walks away. But his is actually so in the books he actually gets a much better gift, and actually most people's gifts are really different. But I think the biggest deal is Sam's, just because I'm like, how can you give this wonderful little hobbit boy rope? You know? So, like, obviously, Frodo's gift is really good. Gimli's gift is obviously really good. Like, Aragorn gets a brooch from Galadriel. And I think everyone else kind of gets, well, Legolas gets a bow. And I think Boromir and Merry and Pippin all get
They
belts.
get belts. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Um, But Sam, he actually gets this little plain box. It's unadorned, save for a single silver rune upon the lid, set G for Galadriel, but it also may stand for garden in your tongue. And in the box, there's earth from Galadriel's orchard, and such blessing as Galadriel has still to bestow is upon it. And she says, "It will not keep you on your road, nor defend you against any peril. But if you keep it and see your home again at last, then perhaps it may reward you. Though you should find all barren and laid waste," which I'm think she's like, the scouring does happen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Rebuild.
There will be few gardens in Middle Earth that will bloom like your garden, if you sprinkle this earth there. Then you may remember Galadriel and catch a glimpse far off of Lorien, that you have seen only in our winter. And
Okay, do you know? Do you want to know what I just realized?
what?
This is can I jump to the end of or the beginning of the Return of the whatever?
Absolutely, you can.
Can I jump forward?
Yes.
You know when Sam has the ring and he has that moment where he has the vision of, because we were talking about what Galadriel or Gandalf would do with the ring, and Sam has his own moment with that where he's like, he would make the whole world into a garden and he would be the main gardener of the world. And then he's like, no, that's too much for one hobbit, that's too much power. But with this box from Galadriel, he's able to have the best garden in Middle Earth without the evil that comes with the ring. That's
Yes.
really cool.
Galadriel gives
Lovely.
him like what his heart most desires, because she knows that when she's,
And that's what he
you know,
was tempted with as well by
yes,
Galadriel. And like he gets it because like his biggest wish that's like corruptible by the ring is still so wholesome that he just gets it.
So wholesome.
yeah.
I just want to plant lots of vegetables.
I know,
Yeah.
and it's so it's like a bunch of dirt in this little box, but then there's also a giant seed, and he doesn't really know what it's for. But then, as we see at the Return of the King, the party tree in Hobbiton gets torn down, and he replaces it, and you know that's like where they have all their get-togethers. So he plants that seed, and it grows one of the Malorn trees, one of those huge trees that they build their houses around in Lothlorien. So it's literally like everything that we've just talked about coming together, as far as like the connections between the different races and their cultures, and like accepting different parts of them, and like everybody working together to make things better. Like even when the elves have left and they are no more, their friendship with, you know, Frodo and Sam is able to improve the Shire after all the horrible things that happen, and the friendship between Gimli and Legolas is able to, you know, harness the beauty of the glittering caves at Helm's Deep and to make beautiful Ithilien, like the forest outside of Mordor on the other opposite side of the river from Gondor, again. And it's just there's so many little things that sprinkled throughout that lead up to this, you know, about everybody just working together to make the world better. And I just it's just one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
That's precious.
It's just good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like in all the meanings of the word.
Aww.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that pretty much covers these chapters. There's like a bunch of little things that we could talk about, but then like we would never stop recording. So, but I think that those are like the big changes that I think are important to mention. And so that leaves us, you know, at the end of this scene in pretty much both the book and the movies, they're sailing down the Anduin, or rowing, however you want to say it. They're boating down the Anduin, and they still have yet to decide what they're gonna do next. That's something that Aragorn is really wrestling with, because in his heart he wanted to go to Minas Tirith with Boromir. his plan was always that, like, I think he assumed that Gandalf would go off with Frodo to Mordor, and that he could split off and go take care of Gondor. But he's the leader of the company now, and he's struggling with what to do, and he's also worried about bringing so many people to Mordor. But he doesn't want to forsake Frodo, because, like, who would?
Mm-hmm.
So he's struggling with that. Nobody has decided what they're gonna do. Frodo isn't sure either. But then they're really happy to have the chance to sail down the Anduin, because then they don't have to pick. They can just go straight for a while.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where we leave them, and where we'll see them pick up next time when we finish up the Fellowship of the Ring in our 10th episode. So, because this is number 9, which I thought was kind of crazy. I'm like, have we really been doing this for like 9-10 weeks at this point? So I think, is there anything else that we needed to touch on, Edith, before we leave Lothlorien?
Do you want to talk about Galadriel and Celeborn's dynamic?
Sure. So Galadriel is married to Celeborn, and I don't really feel like I know that much about Celeborn. And also, I was gonna say, in the movies, like, at that first scene of Celeborn, he sounds like a robot. Like, where is Gandalf? I much desire to speak with him. I was like, what?
Well, now that you said it, I think he's. I don't know much about him either. There could also be something I'm forgetting. But I feel like it's. I don't know. I feel like something in the dynamic or the gender roles is so fresh that, like, Galadriel is the what's the word, the lady of the forest, or the
she seems
ruler.
To be calling more of the shots.
Yeah.
And in the book, when they arrive at Galadriel and Celeborn's dwelling or whatever, Celeborn is doing all the, like, oh, welcome, sit down, and I feel like that's a bit like a hostess thing that he's doing. He's
so
like,
true.
I call him Galadriel's boy toy.
Because he is the one, like, he's being, like, super friendly when they all first show up. He's like, oh, sit down, like, take a load off. He's like, it's all chill here, and then he's like super rude after that. But
yeah.
And and then it's Galadriel that's like, no, we're not doing that here, and then he apologizes. And then later, I'm trying to think of, I'm like, did I even, like, make that many notes about Celeborn? I don't know if I did, but I think it's Celeborn and Aragorn that talk for a hot minute about what it is they're gonna do next, and offering up the boats too. So he's, like, kind of like tactical in that way with Aragorn, whereas Galadriel is kind of focused on, at that point, she's saying farewell, like, several times. Like, she has them drink this cup of farewell, and then she's like, okay, now sit back down again, and then they eat, and then she gives them the gifts, and then she says goodbye. So it's interesting how they kind of, like, they kind of trade off a little bit, even though I don't think that there's any question that, like, Galadriel is the big deal here.
Yeah, and Galadriel does say to, I think when they arrive, that it's good that you've come here, because Celeborn is a mighty elf and he can give great gifts. But then
Galadriel gives all the gifts.
It's her gifts, that are the most meaningful.
Yeah, it's like,
but I think there's a mutual respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all probably talk up our partners or spouses every once in a while, right? Honest, like, absolutely not.
No, that's not what I said.
I'm just saying, for everyone listening and not watching this, that your face.
No.
We're just kidding. We love Josh.
Yes, we do.
We love Josh.
Good.
This is like, I don't, but that's
Yeah.
cool. That's
Well,
cool for you.
I don't know George, and I'm single, but
He's
if I
fine.
wasn't, I would be talking whatever partner I had up. So I agree.
So yeah, we do that sometimes, and I think that it's interesting. It makes me wonder about like, because obviously Tolkien was he called like his story with like Beren and Luthien. He that was a big deal for him, and like obviously took up a big chunk of his brain. And he would call his wife Luthien, and Tinuviel or whatever. Like those were their pet names for each other.
Aww.
But it makes me think about just how Tolkien thinks about like couples and like how is this kind of how most elvish couples would be, or is it specific to Galadriel and Celeborn?
Does
Unclear.
Fandral have a wife?
Does he? I don't know. Who's Legolas's mom?
Yeah.
No idea.
Straight out of a Disney movie, Legolas.
That's true.
Because like her mom died, or his mom died, and all the moms die.
All the moms die in Disney. It's interesting. It's like it's funny. It's like literally, if the story doesn't go there, he doesn't seem to explore that. You know?
Okay.
There's like so many things that we don't know. Like with the whole Tom Bombadil. Like, who is Tom Bombadil really? We don't know. What color is Legolas's hair? No idea. And it's funny because like Tolkien might know, but he just didn't find a reason to put it in the text, because there's stuff like at one point, I think this was like in the 50s, he would still respond to fan mail, like after the Lord of the Rings was published, and somebody wrote to him and was like, does Aragorn have a beard? My family is torn about this. And he goes, no, Aragorn doesn't have a beard. Like, so he knew, but he didn't write that down.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I know. But also, like, but
I'm gonna pretend like he still has a beard. That seems like an important character.
At least some
development
scruff
of him. Yeah.
I mean, they're on the road for months.
Yeah, like when was he shaving? There's no way he was shaving during that time.
Maybe with just trimming with his dagger.
Just so yeah, I think that's a good. I mean, I think that was pretty thorough. Yeah. Anna, do you have any additional thoughts about Lothlorien?
Nope.
All good.
All good here.
Okay, cool. So that means next time we will pick up at the Great River, and we're going to see the breaking of the Fellowship and the departure of Boromir. So get your tissues ready for next time, y'all. And thank you so much for joining us, Iris. Oh, and I forgot to, and so like I mentioned that your Hobbit hot takes on TikTok, and I think that's the best place to find you if you want to engage in some more Lord of the Rings TikTokery.
Yes. Yes, and thank you for inviting me. This was great fun.
Yes, you'll definitely have to join us again when we get. Well, you are going to join us again when we're doing more Sam and Frodo. I think it is. Is it after Shelob's Lair or is it Ciar Thungol? It's somewhere in there.
It's somewhere around there. I think Choices of Master Samwise is definitely in that episode.
Yes,
my
absolutely.
favorite chapter.
It's so good. So I can't wait for that. That'll be tons of fun.
Me neither.
But you're welcome back anytime. And so thank you again for joining us, and thanks to everybody for listening to our nonsense about Lord of the Rings, and we'll see you again next week.